Okay, we're in Kuf Yud Gimel, Halacha Yud Gimel. We'll start today with sort of background, and then Rich Hashem, afterwards more, it's a very long system. Okay, Doug, if you have a fish that a guy salted, uperish ishnan, or you have fruit that was smoked, until you made them edible. Like our friend, that common friend, that was his business to make smoked meat. You made something royal achil through smoking or through salting. It's mutter. Even though the guy made it from not edible to edible, it's mutter. Why? The muluach in a koresech b'gzerezu. As usually the rule is that things that are salted are considered like they're cooked. So you would say, so it should be asr as bishalakim because the guy made it edible. So we say no. In this din, we don't say melech koresech. Salting is not like heating. Until that smoked is not like it's cooked together. And the Ramos sticks in gam kavish in kamavushal. There's another way of preparing foods without cooking, which is called through kavish. You pickle it, and that's not kamavushal. Usually it is kamavushal. Here it's not. The only isser in this whole simon of bishalakim. Here we're almost at the end of the simon, but now you find out it's only if you cook, but not if you prepare it in some other way. Okay. So today we're going to do more of the background of it, and then a different time. I don't want to say next week, but a different time, do the so to speak, Lamaisa application. Okay, now what I'm going to tell you now, Gemara, it's really very much the Gemara Halacha Yud Beis. I didn't say it then because we want to say it more now. And the Gemara says, the Gemara talks about whether there's bishalakim on salted fish, whether there's an issue on salted fish. Chizkiah says that it's mutter. If the guy salted fish, it's mutter. And Rabbi Yochanan says it's asr.
Just to get the perspective of what you're talking about. This is a fish stand that has no Jew watching what's going on.
No. So the Rishonim say that we know that it's a kosher fish. Okay. The only issue that we have here is the fact that the work was done by a guy. Okay. Like imagine in the factory. There's a mashgiach standing there, and the guy are making the fish. He can be standing there watching them make it, just he's not participating. They're doing all the work, so he knows that it's kosher. That's the Rishonim point out. Okay. Now there's two ways to learn this machlokes Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan. Okay. Rashi learns that the simple rule of the Gemara, the guy salted the fish and then you ate it. Okay, Chizkiah says that it's mutter because, like we just read, because there's no din of melech karesech. That din doesn't apply. It's only us if the guy cooked the food. And Rabbi Yochanan holds no. The isser bishalakim is not only if you cook the food. The isser is if a guy makes food edible and that food is all shulchan lachem, then it's also. So the machlokes Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan is whether the isser bishalakim applies to any way of preparing food, and bishul is sort of like an example, or is it very specific only to bishul, but salting or some other way of preparing is not us? Okay? According to Rashi, that's the machlokes thing where Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan. The Rashba and many other Rishonim learn that that's not the machlokes. They say it's pashut that if the guy would make the food edible through salting, it would be mutter. Okay? And I'll tell you in a minute. We'll talk about how they know that. He says it's pashut that if the guy just salting the fish would make it mutter. The Gemara is talking about that the guy made it edible through salting, and then he cooked it afterwards. First, he brined it, and then he cooked it afterwards, like we talked about a few times ago about how you make nowadays, how you make certain kind of fish products. So first he salted it, and then he cooked it. So the salting itself, of course, would not make it asr. What's the machlokes? The machlokes is, Chizkiah says, since he made it edible through salting, it's now a food that's sort of like nechel k'moshu chai. It's edible already, and since it's edible, the fact that he cooked it doesn't do anything. He didn't do anything by cooking it. His cooking didn't do anything wrong. And Rabbi Yochanan holds that it's talking about that he salted only to the point that it's nechel idei chak. It's royal achil idei chak. It's passably edible, but it's not fully edible. And therefore, when he did that cooking still had some use. The cooking made it completely edible. And therefore, Rabbi Yochanan holds that it's also because the guy did the cooking. But if the salting itself will make it completely edible, the Rashba holds is not even a machlokes. Everyone would agree that the food is mutter because it's not bishalakim. It's only salting, and salting is not us. Okay, that's a machlokes rishonim. For us, very important machlokes rishonim about bishalakim. Does it apply? According to the Rashba, it's partial that it doesn't apply to salted foods and such. And according to Rashi, it's a machlokes in the Gemara whether it does or doesn't apply.
So the last thing you just said is if he salted it, made it completely edible. Now, are we saying then he cooked it?
It would still be mutter, right? According to the Rashba, if the guy salted it to the point that it's completely edible, and then he decided to cook it afterwards, it would be mutter also. Once he made it, everyone would agree that if you cook it till it's fully edible, it's mutter afterwards. Okay, so if just
Cooking from raw is the only thing that we call Bishul akum.
correct, yes, correct,
Oh, okay.
correct. That's correct. Okay, now there's a machlokes rishonim who we pass like. Do we pass like Chizki or Rabbi Yochanan? There's a machlokes in the Gemara, and it's a machlokes rishonim whether we pass like Chizki or like Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, how does that relate to us? How does that negate to us? According to Rashi, if we don't know whether we should pass on Chizki or Rabbi Yochanan, means should we pass on that salted food should, if a guy salted food, he was ma'ashin food, should it be mutter, should be asr? It's machlokes. Now it'll be a machlokes in the Gemara, and a machlokes rishonim who we should pass like. Okay, our din said that salted food is, if a guy salted the food and made it edible, it's mutter. Okay, so according to Rashi, so to speak, if Rashi was writing our din, that would be passing like Chizkiah. That's mutter. Okay? According to the Rashba, our din is pasha. The Gemara didn't even have to say our din. In the case where the guy salted it completely, it's pasha that it's mutter. The machlokes Chizkiah Rabbi Yochanan is in halacha yid. In halacha yid, the Mechaber wrote 2 days. What happens if the guy makes the food, it's edible, idei chak, and then he cooked the food? What's the din in that case? That was halacha yid. He wrote 2 days. Machlokes Chizkiah Rabbi Yochanan, and machlokes rishonim who we pass like. So in halacha yid, he brought that if you have the food that's only made passably edible by the salting, and then you did cooking afterwards, is that also a mutter? That was 2 days we had in halacha yid. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch, to me, seems to be going away the Rashba says. If he salted it completely, it's mutter. If he salted it partially and it's sort of edible, then it's a machlokes Gemara, machlokes rishonim, and they put 2 days in the Shulchan Aruch.
Is it a general machlokes? Something is only nechal yidei chak? Is it something is nechal raw?
Same machlokes. It's the same machlokes.
So why did the Gemara put the machlokes on something? Why did the Gemara say
So it can sein. We'll see it in the coming. There may be another Gemara that talks about foods that are only edible yidei chak, eggs. It's coming in a later halacha. So according to the Rashba, you could say, well, why do you have 2 cases in the Gemara? We'll see when we get to those halacha eggs. It might be a little bit different. According to Rashi, it's very simple. One Gemara is about salting, one Gemara is about nechai dei chak. Completely different. Right. So we'll talk about it when we get to halacha, when the halacha, the next halacha Yudal is about eggs. That's another Gemara also. Okay. According to Rashi, there may not be any Gemara about this case, which would also be unusual. The Gemara didn't say anything about it. Okay, we'll see. Okay. Now that we're toward that, which is really, this really question was for halacha yud days. But I just told you this machlokes is the hezber for halacha yud days. I waited to tell you till now because the Rashba says he has basically 3 rayas that it's pasha that things that are made through salting and smoking and brining are not included in Bishul. Okay, 3 basic rayas that he has. Okay. Okay. First raya is if you look at Mishnayos and you want to see where the halacha of Bishul Akum is, okay, the entire halacha of Bishul Akum, not Pasak, the halacha of Bishul Akum is one word. Okay, only one word in the entire Mishnah that says the halacha of Bishul Akum, and that is the Mishnah has a list of foods a list of things that are asur from a goy. Some are asur b'hana, and some are just asur b'achila, and one of them is the hashlakers. Okay, that's the entire hilchos Bishul Akum in one word in the Mishnah. The hashlakers and cooked foods. That's it. It's one of the things that are also for, it's not also b'ana, it's also to eat it, cooked foods from a guy. That's it. That's the entire mission. Yes.
Isn't the word hashlak is a deeper cooking?
I'm going to get that 1 second. I'm getting that in 1 second. Good point. I'm going to get that in a second. So the Rashba says,
Where's the Mishnah?
Lamed Hamid Beis. Just one word. The hashlakas. So the Rashba says, how come if the Mishnah wanted to say the din of food prepared by a guy is usher, why didn't it say some other word that would describe any way of preparing? Why did it use a word that describes cooked food? Why did the Mishnah say cooked? If a guy cooked the food for you, if the answer is for anything, if any way that he prepared it, we should have found some other way, a way to describe a food that a guy cooked, a guy prepared. Obviously, the Mishnah is telling you the only things that are usher are foods that a guy cooked to make it usher. If you prepared it through brining it, that's not usher. If he smoked it, that wouldn't be usher. That's not cooking. So the Mishnah only said used the word shlakas to describe cooking, because the only things that through cooking are the ones that are usher. Things that are through other methods are not usher. Okay, now you have to wonder. I wondered exactly the question Yankee asked. He's making a deal that the Mishnah uses this word for hashlakas. Okay, now we don't call these halachas hilchos shlakas akum. Right? We call it hilchos bishul akum.
It wouldn't sound right.
It wouldn't sound right. We call it hilchos bishul akum. So why on earth did the Mishnah use this word shlakas? Right? What is the word shlakas?
The Gemara discusses.
I'm getting that.
Bishul, and Rashi explains that bishul is cooked. Hashlakas is even.
So why did the Mishnah use such a strange word? I'm not such a great Hebrew speaker, but
What other word should you use?
bishul. V'hamavushal. V'hamavushal.
What are some of the other words in the Mishnah?
Vushal, I don't remember.
Okay, but such a word probably follows along the same line as the other one.
You see, maybe there's some kind of pattern to the verb.
It's not the verb.
Okay.
Look it up, right there.
Okay, we can look at. I'll tell you what I think the answer is. Okay, we can look it up. I mean, this is what it says.
Right there.
He's looking it up. He's pulling it up on his.
You have the real dap,
Okay,
okay?
I have a Mishnah.
Okay, so now I think the answer is like this. Like Yankee said, in the Gemara, the word shlukas means overcooked food. Okay, it's not food that's cooked right. Mevushal is regular cooked, and shlukas is like overcooked, really overcooked. But there's a Mishnah in the Dharm that says, the Mishnah in the Dharm says that if a person says, I won't eat food that's mevushal, I won't eat mevushal, he's allowed to eat hashaluk, this food which is shaluk. So the Rishonim say, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. If I'm not allowed to eat cooked foods, that means shaluk is even more than cooked. So when it became cooked, I wasn't allowed to eat it. Shaluk is even beyond that. So the Rishonim say that usually shaluk means overcooked. That's your answer. Okay, I'm just. This is the Rishonim. The Rush and the Rush and the Ran say like this. They say usually shaluk means overcooked. Sometimes shaluk means undercooked. Sometimes shaluk means less than fully cooked. And in the Mishnah, in the Dharm, the word shaluk means less than fully cooked. So I think that the reason why the Mishnah describes the Isser Bishalakim as Bahashlaka is because the din is, if a guy cooks a food, even if he doesn't make it fully cooked, if he makes it even partially cooked, if he makes it Kamach Ben Destroy, it's already Asher. That was halach we had in halacha test. It's not only Hamavushal, even fully cooked foods, even partially cooked foods are also Asher from a guy. So the Mishnah is trying to tell you, if you would say V'hamavushal, you would say, if the guy cooks a food, then it's Asr. But if he only partially cooks it, then it's not Asr. So it's coming to tell you, V'hashlak, no, even the Ramah agrees. If the guy makes it partially cooked, and you don't cook it afterwards, at that point, but the Mishnah is Hashlak, if the guy cooked it, even partially, it's Asr. Now, can you save it? The Mishnah is not telling you how to get out of the Bishul.
Can Bishul also have that connotation of
No, Bishul means cooked. You made it edible.
Bishul?
This is my shot.
Michael Ben Destroy is
That's my
also...
shot.
Michael Ben Destroy is also... Somebody which is Mavash.
Yeah, but the word shluk is telling you, this is not regular. I'm using a funny word to tell you, I'm not talking about regular bishul, I'm talking about some unusual kind of bishul, and I think it's to tell us halacha test. Which is...
Did someone order anything from the North Shore Bakery? Challahs?
Halacha test. I don't know. So,
That's what the bill, Maish.
Okay. Let's continue. Okay. The second proof. So that was the first. That's the first raya of the Rajba. I digress for a second. But the first raya of the Rajba is that the Mishnah uses a word that describes cooking. If it says the word cooking, obviously things that are not through cooking are not us. That's the first raya. The second raya is like this. The Rajba is going to say I'm just going to outline a few. He's going to bring you 5 different ways of preparing food.
The shulchan is more a connotation of like boiling with water.
Yes, it is boiling with water. That's
I
good.
mean, it's even limiting.
I'll get to that in a second. Okay. Well, the second answer will answer your question. The Rashba says there are 5 ways of preparing food that are discussed in the Gemara, and for each one of those ways, he's going to bring you a raya that each one of those is cooked or asr. Okay. So the first is shlukas, food that's cooked. Cooking like with water, like David just said, cooking with water is the Mishnah. The Mishnah says v'hashlukas are asr. Cooking is asr. The Gemara talks about if you're roasting meat, how you should do it in a way to avoid bishalakim. We've talked about those halachas before. What you should do and in which cases there are problems with bishalakim. The implication obviously is that if the guy would roast the meat completely without any participation and any watching, whatever, the Gemara has a bunch of things you do, it would be asr. So the Gemara is saying that not only is cooking through liquids asr, like the Mishnah says, but that word is a broader word which includes any cooking through fire, even roasting means without liquids is also asr also. Okay, that's the Gemara. So the Rashi says, see, the Gemara says, so far we have a Mishnah that says cooking, we have a Gemara that says baking or roasting is also asr. Okay, now next, the Maliach, I just told you the Gemara before him, that according to the Rajba, the Gemara about Maliach says is assuming that things that are through salting, preparing food through salting is for sure mutter. Okay, it does not make bishalakim. Okay, that's his third thing. So we have so far cooking, roasting, and salting. Now, of course, you know that Rashi doesn't agree with him. Rashi holds that it's a machlokes in the Gemara. But according to the Rajba, that Gemara says that things that are salted, it's assumed in the Gemara that salted food does not make bishalakim. Okay, next, there's a Mishnah later on Lamed Testament base that says, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correction, kvushin, shalakim, pickled foods of a guy, if the standard is to pickle those foods not using wine vinegar or wine, but to use some other method, then the Mishnah says it's mutter. The Mishnah is not talking about Bishul Akum. The Mishnah is talking about the isurim of should you be chodesh that the stam yayin mixed in. So the Gemara says the Mishnah says if its standard is to not use stam yayin, then it's mutter. You're allowed to eat those foods. Okay, that's what the Mishnah says. So the Rashba says, wait a second. What happened to Bishul Akum? You're going to buy pickled foods. It doesn't say what kind of pickled foods. It doesn't say only pickled cucumbers that are edible raw. It says any kind of pickled foods. And in fact, Rashi says kfushin means meat, or Rashi has a bunch of examples, including meat and fish, animals' heads. I don't know what that is, but some kind of a thing. Animal heads. So Rashi has a bunch of examples. And it's an open case. Anything pickled, as long as you know that they don't use wine, then you're allowed to eat that food. So the Rashi says you see that pickling also doesn't cause Bishul Akum. Okay? Now, you realize that the Mishnah says that. You could well read the Mishnah differently. Okay? The Mishnah also doesn't say that you have to make sure it's from a kosher animal. The Mishnah doesn't say a lot of things. It's just telling you, it's focusing on the wine shaboy. If you don't have to be kosher for wine, then you're allowed to eat it. And it tells you, it's teaching you a thing about how much you have to be kosher for an Issa Draban. So, but the Rashba is learning that you see from this Gemara that that there's no concern of that guy prepared the food just because he pickled it. Okay, so you see that pickling doesn't cause Bishul Akum. Okay, again, you could read it differently. Okay, you could read it differently, but that's how you say it.
What happened? The Jew did the pickling?
No, that the pickling is talking about cucumbers. Pickles in my house. In other words, it's not telling you, and make sure it's not Arla. Okay, it doesn't have to tell you. In other words, other Yisroel, that's your business to make sure that there other Yisroel are not there. But it's just focusing on when do you have to be choishish that they're using wine, which would be asam d'Rabbanan. For an Issa D'Oraisa, you'd be choishish this much. Since it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, you're choishish this much. That's what the Mishnah is focusing on. It's not talking to you about the other details of it. Is it kosher? It's an animal leg. How do you know it's a kosher animal? It's not talking about that. That's your problem. That's like sort of not the focus of the Mishnah. But the Rashba knows that's what it is. And the last case is, this is we're not really going to talk about this time, which is that the Yushalmi says, this is going to be Amir Teshem for next time, that the Yushalmi says, at least according to his reading, the Yushalmi says that smoked food does not need Bishul Yisrael. The Yushalmi talking about Bishul Akum says, if a guy prepares his food through smoking, it doesn't need Bishul Yisrael. Okay? Now, we'll see how clear it is whether the Yushalmi says that.
Cold smoker.
We'll see when we get to that Yushalmi what it says. But the Rashba's point here is that he has 5 ways of preparing food. Cooking in water and roasting are Bishul Akum. Salting, pickling, and smoking, we have a Mishnah or a Yushalmi or a Bavli that are saying that those things are not usher. He says, so if you look at this whole picture now, I showed you these 5 different cases, you look at this whole picture, it tells you what? That the only things that are usher if you cook through fire. If you cook cooking or roasting, that's usher. If you prepare it any other way, then it's mutter. So that's the Rashba's second raya that to what argument over here is, and that's his raya that the Gemara, it's partial to the Gemara, that salting is mutter, only things through fire are usher. Okay, that's the second raya.
And what you said before about I forgot the word that you said. The whole thing started with. That's in the Mishnah.
Shlach, right?
Okay. You said maybe it's undercooked, less than fully cooked.
Right.
If that's awesome, does it ever become mutter?
Yes. So there are those who hold that if the guy cooked it partially and the yid then cooks more afterwards, it may be mutter afterwards. But in its status as is, when the guy cooked it partially, right now it's usher. It may be able to be saved and be made mutter later, but as it stands today, it's usher. Okay. So in this raya of the Rashba, as I mentioned, in this raya of the Rashba, the case of cooking and roasting are very clear. On each one of the other cases, the ones that says that there's no issue Bishul Akum, we could have argued on each one of them. Okay? We could argue on the salting, that's a Maslekes Rashba and the Rashi. On the Mishnah of Kfushin, we talked that it may not be such a right, and the Yerushalmi we'll still see about that. Okay? Well, Yerushalmi is for next time. Okay, his last right is
there anybody that says that since fish can be made royal achila through salting, it's something that's nechal chai, because it can be prepared without heat, and then if you cook it straight, without any salting, you cook it straight, it's not Bishul Akum because it's come nechal chai.
No, nobody says that.
Nobody says
no, it's actually just the opposite. Because when we did those halachas about salting fish, they say no, there are ways to salt fish that make it completely mutter. And alpha pekin, if you cooked it, it's also. There was preparation over there that if you did that you could, if you over salt it. And the dinim of salting fish was so you salt it a little bit. If you over salt it, it would be royal achila. And alpha pekin too bad. If you don't prepare it that way, it's too bad. Okay.
The sushi became nechal chai, no?
That's a question. Okay, what to talk about? Okay, now the Rashba's third raya is that the Gemara says, how do we know that Bishul Akum is usher? The Gemara on Lamed Zion and Bay says, how do we know that Bishul Akim is also?
Where's this Rashba, by the way?
The Rash is in Tersabais. Yeah, the Rash is in Tersabais. The Rash is the third right. He says, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says, how do we know you're not allowed to eat Bishul Akim? So the Gemara first says is, it comes from a pasuk. Because it says, when the Yidden were approaching one of the nations in the Midbar, I don't remember which one, it says, "Umayim akesem titem li v'shasisi." Water, we'll pay for our water and I'll drink from it, meaning we won't drink from the be'er, that's what they were saying. So the Gemara says that we learn from there that the only things you're allowed to eat that a goy prepared is water. Water they were willing to take from them. Okay? But anything else they wouldn't take from them. Why? Because things that are edible as is, that the Gemara says, it's not changed through heat. It is what it is that you're allowed to eat from the goy. But anything that was changed through heat, a potato, we didn't have potatoes in the middle, okay? A piece of chicken that was changed through heat. In order to make it edible, you had to cook it. Anything that was changed through heat, you're not allowed to eat, and that the Gemara says is the makor to the Isser Bishul Akim. So the Gemara says, now the Gemara says that's not really true. The Gemara says it's not a good riot because it doesn't say anything about fire in this pasuk. Elamai, the Gemara says this has nothing to do with that. It's a Xeris Rabbanah. Okay, but the Gemara first thought that the Isser learned that from this pasuk, and the definition of the Isser is Ma Mayim Lo Nishtan Adei Ha'ar. I've called only things that I eat from goy is things that are not Nishtan Adei Ha'ar. Okay, that's the Gemara's description of the Isser. So even now, when we fall off of this limud, we don't learn it anymore from that pasuk from the pasuk of Mayim Titanli, Mayim Lakesa Titanli V'Shasisi. We don't learn it from that pasuk anymore. Afal Pikein, the idea of how the Isser is set up is still the same, and the Isser is only for foods that are Nishtana Adei Ha'ar. Things that are not Nishtana Adei Ha'ar are not Asr. So that's the Gemara, or the diak in the Gemara, that food prepared through other means is not considered Bishul Akim. Okay, now, I have just one little question. It's not a question on the Raj, but it's not a question on him. Just a question, it's sort of a question on the Gemara. Well, the way the Raj was learning it, which is, the Gemara said, you're only allowed to drink water because water was Lo Nishtan Adei Ha'ar. Okay? Because what? Because water you just drink straight. You don't do anything to it before you drink it. Okay, well guess what? You don't pickle water either before you drink it. Nor do you salt it. Nor do you smoke it. What do you eat raw? So why wouldn't if we want to learn it from Umayim, why don't we say it's Ma Mayim, you're eating it as it came out of the ground. You did nothing to prepare it. Av Kol is only usher if you didn't change it at all. You take an apple off the tree and you bite into it. But if you salt it, why wouldn't it be usher? If the limit is from this pasuk, we can only drink water, which is what's special about water, that it's not changed from its natural state, that's mutter. So why wouldn't the end of that sentence be Av Kol, that's not changed from the way it was? A cucumber is as I take off the cucumber and I eat it. So, but if I would change it, if I would pickle my cucumber, it's half it should be usher. It's not the same as water. So it's not a catch on the Raj, but the Raj was, it does say it in the Gemara, just like water is not Nishtan Adei Ha'ar. I just wonder how the way he's learning, why did the Gemara Taka say that? Why did it say Nishtan Adei Ha'ar? That's not really the rule. The rule is really, that's not the comparison to water. Water is not changed at all. But that's okay. Anyhow, so where we left off, where we're holding at is that we have which is what we're passing, that there's rayas that only things cooked through fire, as the words of the Rama and so El Bishal shall Eish, that's the only thing that are usher. And if a guy prepares food through salting or brining or smoking, those are other ways of preparing food, but it's not usher. So now we're sort of like in a background of it. And Mr. Hashem, for next time, just very serious halacha l'maaseh, I'll talk about Yerushalmi and steaming in the future. Thank you.